Revenge with Karen.
I knew the axe was falling the moment I saw the calendar invite. Synergy and alignment sync, 4:45 p.m. on a Friday. Nothing good happens at 4:45 p.m. on a Friday. That's the time slot reserved for cowardly breakups and corporate executions. I walked into the conference room, the glass-walled fishbowl they call the think tank, and the air conditioning was humming that low, aggressive frequency that always gave me a migraine behind my left eye. Julian was there. Julian, our new director of finance, a man whose resume was 80% buzzwords and 20% failing upwards. He was wearing a suit that cost more than my car, but it fit him like shrink wrap on a ham. He was tapping a gold pen against a leather notebook that I knew for a fact contained 0 notes, just doodles of dollar signs and his own initials. Didn't look up when I entered. He was too busy staring at his reflection in the darkened monitor of the teleconferencing screen, fixing his hair. That's the kind of leadership we were dealing with. If you're reading this and you've ever had a boss who prioritizes his hair gel over the impending IRS audit, go ahead and hit subscribe and maybe drop a like, because you're about to witness a level of petty revenge that usually requires a hazmat suit. "Chloe," he said, finally turning around. He smiled. It was the smile of a shark that had just read a book on empathy but didn't quite understand the concept. "Thanks for joining. Have a seat." I sat. The chair was one of those ergonomic mesh torture devices that cost $800 but feels like sitting on a fishing net. I folded my hands on the table. I didn't bring a notebook. I didn't need one. My brain is a repository of 12 years of this company's financial history. I know where the bodies are buried because I dug the graves, filed the burial permits, and amortized the cost of the shovels over a 5-year depreciation schedule. So, Julian started, clasping his hands. "We've been looking at the Q3 projections and the operational overhead. The audit starts Monday, Julian," I said, cutting through the fluff. "The IRS field agents will be here at 9 a.m. Prepared the data extracts for the 1,099 discrepancies you asked about, but the SQL query needs to be run manually because the server patch on Tuesday broke the automation." He blinked. The words SQL query and server patch bounced off his forehead like pebbles off a tank. "Right. The audit, we're confident about that. But this meeting is about structure." He slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a single sheet. No envelope, just a raw, naked printed page. "We're pivoting to a cloud-based, automated solution for systems administration," he said, reciting the script he'd probably practiced in the mirror. "We need to be leaner, more agile. Your role, specifically the manual nature of it, is a legacy cost we can no longer justify." I looked at the paper. It was a separation agreement. The severance was laughable. 2 weeks. 2 weeks of pay for 12 years of keeping their financial vascular system from exploding. "You're firing me," I said. My voice didn't shake. It was flat, monotone, the vocal equivalent of a spreadsheet with no formatting. 3 days before an IRS audit covering 5 fiscal years. "We're eliminating the position," Julian corrected, his voice dripping with condescension. "And honestly, Chloe, looking at your salary line, it's a waste. For us now, have software that does what you do." I saw a demo last week. It's drag and drop, very intuitive. I almost laughed. I really did. He thought my job was drag and drop. He thought the tangled web of legacy code, custom scripts, and Visual Basic macros that held this company's ledger together was something you could replace with an app that had a pretty user interface. "Julian," I said slowly, "the system isn't standard. It's custom. I built the bridges between the payroll module and the general ledger myself because the vendor went bankrupt in 2018. If you remove me, you remove the bridge. We have consultants starting Monday," he said, waving his hand dismissively. "Top tier. They'll handle the transition. Now, per security protocol, I need your badge, your laptop, and the administrator password for the root finance directory." The silence that followed was heavy. I could hear the hum of the vending machine down the hall. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. He wasn't just firing me, he was erasing me. He was telling me that my intellect, my late nights, my weekends spent nursing their crashed servers back to life, were worth less than a software license. "The password," he repeated, tapping the table. "Now, please, or we'll have to involve security to escort you out, and I'd hate to make a scene." A scene. He was worried about a scene. I looked at him. I looked at his expensive watch and his empty eyes. A cold calm washed over me. It was the feeling of an equation finally balancing out to zero. "Okay," I said. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a pen. I took the separation agreement, flipped it over to the blank side, and wrote a single string of characters. I pressed down hard, the ink bleeding slightly into the paper. I slid it back to him. He picked it up and read it. "Good luck with the audit." Looked at me, then let out a short, barking laugh. "Very funny, Chloe. A little bit of admin humor. Is this the actual password?" Yes, I lied. It wasn't the password. It was a statement of fact. It was a prophecy. "Fine," he said, tucking the paper into his jacket pocket like it was a receipt for a sandwich. "HR will email you the details about Cobra. You can leave your things at the desk." I stood up. My legs felt light. I felt like an astronaut decoupling from a burning space station. I placed my badge on the table. It made a plastic clack sound that echoed in the empty room. "Goodbye, Julian," I said. "Make sure the consultants know about the recursive loop in the accounts payable script. It gets moody if you don't feed it the date in ISO 8601 format." "I'm sure they'll figure it out," he smirked, already looking back at his phone. "They're professionals." I walked out of the think tank. I walked past my cubicle, past the dying ficus plant I'd watered for a decade, past the server room door that hummed with the noise of 1,000 fan blades spinning in the dark. I didn't look back. I walked to the elevator, pressed the down button, and waited. As the doors closed, cutting off the view of the gray carpet and the fluorescent lights, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I checked my watch. 5:01 p.m. I was officially unemployed. Julian was officially the captain of the Titanic, 10 seconds after hitting the iceberg, wondering why the ice cubes in his drink were rattling. The drive home was a blur of cornfields and strip malls. Illinois in the late afternoon has a specific quality of light, gray, flat, and uncompromising. It matched my mood perfectly. I pulled into my driveway, the gravel crunching under my tires like brittle bones. My house is small, mid-century ranch I bought 5 years ago, paid for by the overtime hours that Julian just called a waste. I walked inside, kicked off my heels, and went straight to my home office. This room was the antithesis of the office I had just left. It was cool, dark, and silent. 3 monitors sat on my desk, a cockpit of control. I sat down and woke them up. The screens glowed with a soothing blue light. I still had remote access. They hadn't cut it yet. Of course they hadn't. Julian probably didn't even know who to call to shut down the VPN tunnel I had configured for myself 3 years ago when the blizzard of 22 trapped us all at home. To him, IT was just a nebulous cloud of nerds in the basement. He didn't realize that I was the one who managed the permissions for the finance sector. I logged in. My fingers flew across the mechanical keyboard. The click-clack sound, rhythmically satisfying, wasn't there to destroy data. I'm not a criminal, I'm a professional. There's a very thick, very distinct line between sabotage and malicious compliance. I was about to walk that line like a tightrope walker in stilettos. First, I checked the backups. I initiated a final, encrypted backup of the entire finance directory to an external drive connected to the server. Not for me to keep, but to ensure that when they inevitably crashed the system, the data existed somewhere, even if they couldn't access it. I'm not a monster. I just wanted them to sweat, not burn to the ground. Then came the cleaning. Over the years, I had written dozens of scripts to automate the mundane parts of my job. Scripts that pulled exchange rates from the web at 2:00 a.m., scripts that cross-referenced vendor invoices against shipping manifests, scripts that auto-corrected the terrible data entry habits of the sales team. These weren't company property, were my personal tools, stored in a folder marked /Chloe tools/. They were the digital equivalent of a mechanic bringing their own high-end wrench set to a garage. When a mechanic gets fired, they don't leave their Snap-on tools behind. They pack up their box. I open the terminal window. rm rf/usr/local/finance/scripts/Chloe tools/ I hovered my finger over the enter key. Thought about the time I spent Christmas Eve 2019 rewriting the depreciation algorithm because Congress changed the tax code 3 days before year-end. I thought about the time Julian's predecessor called me a lifesaver, but gave the bonus to the sales guy who couldn't use a calculator. I pressed enter. Deleted. Next, the documentation. The runbook. This was a 300-page PDF I had meticulously compiled over a decade. Contained the passwords to the legacy databases, the contact numbers for the retired developers who wrote the original code in the 90s, the quirky workarounds for when the server froze on Tuesdays. It was the map to the labyrinth. It was stored on my personal cloud drive, which I had, out of the kindness of my heart, shared with the department. I revoked the sharing permissions. Link expired. Now, the system was naked. It was just raw code and data, stripped of the automated logic I had wrapped around it like a protective blanket. The error checking? Gone. The auto backups? Gone. The daily reports that appeared in Julian's inbox every morning at 8 a.m., making him look competent to the board? Gone. I looked at the clock. 6:30 p.m. The system was already starting to hiccup. I could see the error logs spiking on the dashboard. A scheduled task had tried to run, looked for one of my scripts, found nothing, vomited a generic error 404 into the void. I opened the main admin panel. This was it, the final step. I went to the user credentials settings. I found the admin account, the one Julian would try to use on Monday. I reset the password. I typed in the new password, good luck with the audit. I confirmed it. Then I went to my own account, Chloe Admin, the account that had root access to everything, the account that held the keys to the kingdom. I disabled it, didn't delete it. That would be destruction of evidence if things got legal. I simply locked it. I encrypted the access key with a 256-bit hash that would take a supercomputer 100 years to crack without the passphrase. And the passphrase? It was the name of the first dog I had when I was 6 years old, backwards, combined with the date I started this thankless job. I logged out. The screens went black. The hum of my computer fans slowed down. Room was silent. I stood up and walked to the kitchen. I opened a bottle of Pinot Noir, not the cheap stuff I usually bought, but a bottle I had been saving for a special occasion. I poured a glass, filling it to the brim. I walked out to my back porch. The sun had set, and the fireflies were starting to blink in the tall grass at the edge of the yard. It was peaceful. Somewhere, in a server room 20 miles away, a red light began to blink on a rack-mounted drive. It was a small light, insignificant, but it was the first crack in the dam. I took a sip of wine. It tasted like oak and cherries and freedom. Good luck, Julian, I whispered to the darkness. I hope your consultants are better at reading spaghetti code than they are at reading the room. Monday morning arrived with the slow, deliberate pace of a heavy storm front. I woke up at 7 a.m. out of habit, but instead of rushing to the shower and chugging lukewarm coffee, stayed in bed. I listened to the birds outside. I stretched. It was the most luxurious sensation I had felt in years. By 8:30 a.m., I was sitting on my porch, a fresh cup of French press coffee steaming in my hands, wearing my pajamas. I didn't have to be anywhere. I didn't have to explain to a 24-year-old marketing associate why they couldn't expense a team-building trip to a strip club in Vegas. 20 miles away, the scene would be very different. I closed my eyes and let my imagination, fueled by 12 years of experience, paint the picture. At 8:45 a.m., the IRS auditors would be arriving. They aren't the guys from the movies with guns and badges. They are worse. They are men and women in gray suits who carry rolling briefcases filled with despair. They smell like toner and dry cleaning. They don't smile. They don't accept coffee. They just want the general ledger, the transaction logs, the depreciation schedules for fiscal years 2019 through 2023. Julian would be greeting them. He'd be wearing his best I'm in charge and totally not terrified smile. He'd usher them into the conference room, the same one where he fired me, and offer them water. They would decline. We'll need access to the financial system immediately, the lead auditor would say. Let's call him Agent Smith. Have a randomized list of 500 transactions we need to verify. Of course, Julian would say, we have a state-of-the-art system, very intuitive. He would lead them to the designated terminal. He would sit down, confident, ready to show off. He would type in the username, admin. Then he would type in the password he thought was a joke. Good luck with the audit. He would hit enter. Access denied. I took a sip of my coffee. The bitterness was perfect. Julian would frown. Try again? Maybe he typed it wrong. Maybe it was case sensitive. He'd type it slower this time, hunting and pecking the keys. GOODLUCK, access denied. Account locked. Please contact system administrator. Is there a problem? Agent Smith would ask, checking his watch. The IRS bills for their time effectively. Every minute wasted is a mark against the company's competence. Just a technical glitch, Julian would stammer. Sweat would be starting to bead on his upper lip. Let me just call IT. He would call IT. But IT doesn't manage the finance server permissions. I did. The IT guy, probably Kevin, a sweet kid who only knows how to restart routers, would tell him, Chloe handled all the access controls for that box, sir. I don't have the root password. Well, reset it. Julian would hiss into the phone, trying to keep his voice down so the auditors wouldn't hear. I can't, Kevin would say. The encryption key is local to the admin profile. If we force a reset without the key, the database locks itself down to prevent tampering. It's a security feature. Chloe set it up after the ransomware scare in 21. I smiled. I remembered setting that up. Julian had complained then that it was too restrictive. I had told him it was industry standard. My phone buzzed on the patio table. I looked at the screen. It was a text from Sarah in payroll. Sarah was my work wife. She knew everything. Text, OMG. Julian is running around the office like a headless chicken. The IRS guys are just sitting there staring at a blank screen. He's screaming at Kevin. What did you do? Face with tears of joy, I didn't reply. I just watched a cardinal land on the bird feeder. My phone buzzed again. This time, an email notification from Julian Vance at CompanyCom subject. Urgent, password issue Chloe, hope you're well. There seems to be a confusion with the password you left. It's not working. The auditors are here. Please send the correct one ASAP. This isn't the time for games. I archived the email without opening it. Then the phone rang. It was the office number. I let it ring. It rang 4 times, then went to voicemail. I imagined Julian's face. Red, blotchy, panic setting in behind the buttocks. He was realizing that the drag and drop system wasn't dragging, and it certainly wasn't dropping anything but his career down the toilet. The system was reacting exactly as I had programmed it to react to unauthorized entry attempts. Without the handshake script that ran from my user profile, the database assumed it was under attack. It was currently encrypting the transaction logs to protect them. It's not a bug, Julian, I said to the buzzing phone. It's a feature. I poured myself another cup of coffee. The morning was just getting started. By 11 o'clock a.m., the cavalry had arrived, or rather, mercenaries in better suits than the cavalry. Sarah kept me updated via a stream of text messages that were more entertaining than any Netflix series. Apparently, Julian had panicked and called In Solutions Inc., high-priced IT consulting firm that charged $400 an hour per head and specialized in digital transformation. Text from Sarah. 3 guys just walked in. They look like they were 3D printed in a Brooks Brothers. Julian is bowing to them. The IRS agents are currently reading magazines in the lobby. This is a disaster. I knew exactly what was happening. The consultants would sit down at the terminals, crack their knuckles, expect to see a standard Oracle or SAP environment. They would expect nice, clean tables with names like table employees and table salaries. Instead, they were walking into a haunted house built of code. Our finance system was a Frankenstack. It started as a D-base Roman 4 system in the 90s, migrated to SQL Server in the 2000s, and was patched together with Python scripts, Visual Basic macros, and prayer. Had named the tables based on the logic of the time they were created. The table for contractor payouts wasn't called contractor payouts. It was called TBL Project Zeus 2015 because that's what the CEO at the time called the initiative, and changing the table name would have broken 18 other dependencies. Only I knew that. I pulled up LinkedIn on my iPad. I saw Julian's profile, visionary leader driving efficiency. I snorted. Consultants would be looking for the documentation, the runbook. They would be searching the shared drive for the PDF I had revoked access to. Text from Kevin, IT. Hey Chloe, sorry to bother you. The new guys are asking for the network topology map for the finance cluster. They say the one on the server is a dead link. Do you have a copy? Julian is breathing down my neck. I looked at the text. Poor Kevin. He was innocent in this. But helping Kevin meant helping Julian. Reply to Kevin, hey Kev. I left all relevant documentation on the shared drive before I departed on Friday. If it's not there, it must have been removed during the transition. I don't have access to company files anymore. Good luck, a half-truth. The link was dead because I killed it. But legally, I was squeaky clean. I wasn't an employee. I shouldn't have company data. I could imagine the scene in the server room. The consultants, sweat rings forming under their arms, staring at cron job labeled "Do not touch this or payroll dies." They wouldn't know what it did. It was a script that converted the timestamp from UTC to Central Time, accounting for daylight savings, because the payroll software had a bug that deducted an hour of pay from everyone twice a year if you didn't run it. If they disabled it, lawsuits from the Department of Labor. If they ran it twice, everyone gets double paid. They were flying a plane blindfolded. The controls were labeled in a language only I spoke. Text from Sarah, crying, laughing emoji. One of the consultants just asked Julian what the Kraken is. I heard him say, I think it's a script. I laughed out loud on my porch. The Kraken was a data scrubbing tool I wrote to clean up the messy data from the sales team. It was aggressive. It deleted duplicates without mercy. If configured wrong, it would eat the entire database. Don't release the Kraken, boys, I muttered. Around 1:00 p.m., my phone rang again. Not the office number. It was a blocked number. I knew who it was. Julian was bypassing the official channels. He was desperate. The IRS agents had probably finished their magazines and were starting to talk about obstruction and penalties. I let it ring. The voicemail notification popped up instantly. I played it on speaker. Chloe. Julian's voice was different. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a tight, strangled tone. Look, we need to talk. The consultants are having trouble mapping the architecture. The documentation seems to be missing. I need you to come in, just for an hour. We can pay you a consulting fee, a generous one. Please call me back, immediately. Generous consulting fee, I repeated. I thought about my severance, 2 weeks. I thought about the waste comment. I picked up my phone and typed a text to Sarah. Ask the consultant if he's tried running the restore default command on the main cluster. Text from Sarah, you want me to help them? Me, trust me. Text from Sarah, okay, I told them. The lead guy is typing it in now. I smiled. The restore default command didn't restore the system. It restored the display settings of the terminal to the factory default, which was a violently bright green text on a black background, focused on an 800x600 resolution. It wouldn't fix the data, but it would make the monitors look like they were from 1982. It was a cosmetic prank I'd left for myself years ago. Text from Sarah, OMFK. The screens all just turned neon green. The consultant looks like he's going to vomit. Julian is screaming. The IRS guy just stood up and said this is unprofessional. I leaned back in my chair. Bridge wasn't just burning, it was exploding in Technicolor fireworks. The sun was high in the sky now, baking the Illinois plains, but I felt cool as a cucumber. The initial panic at the office had likely curdled into a heavy, suffocating dread. The consultants had failed. The drag-and-drop solution was a myth. Now, it was just Julian and the consequences of his own ego. At 2:15 p.m., my phone rang again. Same blocked number. I stared at it. Could have ignored it all day. I should have ignored it all day. But a small, dark part of me, the part that had been talked over in meetings for a decade, the part that had fixed their mistakes while they slept, wanted to hear it. I wanted to hear the fear. I swiped green. Hello, I said, my voice bright and cheery, the voice of a woman enjoying her first day of unemployment. Chloe, Julian shouted. He sounded breathless, like he'd been running. Aren't you answering my emails? I don't work for the company anymore, Julian, I said. I don't check that email address. And checking it would be a violation of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, wouldn't it? Unauthorized access and all that. Cut the crap, he snapped, his old aggression flaring up for a second before collapsing back into desperation. We are in a crisis here. The IRS agents are threatening to flag us for noncompliance. They're talking about freezing accounts. The consultants can't make heads or tails of your files. My files? I feigned innocence. You mean the company's files? The ones you said were obsolete? The ones the new software was going to replace? The software isn't ready, he yelled. Okay, is that what you want to hear? The integration failed. We need the legacy system online. Now, where is the documentation? Where is the runbook? I told Kevin, I said calmly. It was on the shared drive. Folder Z/finance/admin/docs/. I put it there Friday afternoon. It's not there, Julian screamed. The folder is empty. Oh, I paused for effect. A long, delicious pause, that's right. You ordered a server cleanup Friday night. To trim the fat, remember? You told IT to purge all non-essential user directories to make space for the new cloud migration data. Silence. Dead silence. He hadn't actually ordered that specific purge. He had ordered a general cleanup of legacy data. He didn't know enough about the system to know if he had deleted it or not. I was gaslighting him with his own incompetence. I didn't, he stammered. You must have, I said, my voice hardening, because I left it there. If it's gone, Julian, that's an operational error on your end. Sounds like you deleted the instruction manual for the nuclear reactor while the core was heating up. Chloe, please, his voice broke, was a sound I'll never forget. The sound of a man who realizes his leased BMW is about to be repossessed along with his reputation. I'm asking you as a friend, help us. Just tell me the admin password, the real one. I gave you the password, I said. Good luck with the audit is not a password. It was a memo, Julian, I said, the password. Well, I can't quite recall. It's been a stressful weekend. Being fired really scrambles the memory. You know how it is. Drama blocks things out. I'll hire you back, he blurted out. Double your salary, right now. I'll email the contract. I looked at my garden. The hydrangeas were blooming beautifully. No, I said. What? Why? Because you said my salary was a waste, I replied. And I don't want to be a burden on your budget. You have those expensive consultants to pay for. Chloe, don't do this. We're going to fail the audit. I know, I said. You should probably start updating your resume. Julian, I hear the market is tough right now. I hung up. Then I blocked the number. My heart was pounding, not from fear, but from adrenaline. It was the rush of standing up to a bully who had forgotten that the victim was the one holding the baseball bat. I went back inside and opened my laptop, my personal one. I logged into the public court records database. I wanted to see if the company had filed any emergency injunctions yet. Nothing. We're too paralyzed to even lawyer up properly. They were drowning, and I was the only lifeguard sitting on the beach watching the waves. Tuesday passed in a haze of silence from the company, but a storm of noise from the rumors. By Wednesday, the specifics of the catastrophe began to leak out. Without my scripts running interference, the raw data was being presented to the IRS agents naked and screaming. Here's the thing about corporate finance. It's messy. Expenses get miscategorized. Invoices get duplicated. Dates get transposed. My job wasn't just to store the data, it was to sanitize it. I had a script called Sandy CheckPie that ran every night at 3:00 a.m. It looked for anomalies, like a $50,000 payment to a vendor labeled MISC Office Supplies, and flagged them for review before they hit the general ledger. Without that script, the MISC Office Supplies payment was just sitting there, glaringly obvious. Sarah texted me around noon on Wednesday. Text, it's a bloodbath. The IRS found the executive retreat expenses from 2021. The ones Julian said were client development. I winced. I remembered that. They had expensed a trip to Cabo San Lucas. I had flagged it internally 3 times. Julian had overridden me, forcing the entry. But in my system, had tagged it with a digital sticky note. Potential audit risk override by J. Vance. But the auditors couldn't see my internal notes because the interface was broken. They just saw the raw expense. $42,000 Hotel California, Cabo, text, and the depreciation schedules are wrong. The system is calculating the write-offs based on the 2015 tax code because the updater script didn't run. That was the kicker. The tax code changes my scripts automatically adjusted the depreciation curves for millions of dollars in heavy machinery. Without that adjustment, the company was currently claiming deductions they weren't entitled to. That's not just a mistake, that's tax fraud. I sat on my couch, feeling a strange mix of vindication and horror. I hadn't realized how much actual crime, or at least gross negligence, I had been shielding them from. I was the dam holding back the sewage. Now the dam was gone. The fix team, the consultants, had apparently given up on understanding the system and were trying to manually rebuild the data in Excel. Imagine trying to rebuild a skyscraper using Lego while the building is currently on fire. Text from Sarah. They're interviewing people now, asking who authorized these payments. Everyone is pointing at Julian. He looks like he hasn't slept in 3 days. He's wearing the same shirt. System was doing exactly what a system should do. It was showing the truth. It was no longer lying for them. I logged into my bank account. My final paycheck had been deposited, along with the pitiful severance. It was accurate to the penny. At least the payroll auto run had finished before I was fired. I thought about the IRS agents. By now, they wouldn't just be looking for errors. They would be looking for intent. And because the system looked so chaotic, unmanaged, it looked like deliberate obfuscation. Incompetence looks a lot like malice when you're under audit, I said to my cat, Mr. Whiskers. He blinked at me, unimpressed. I walked to my bookshelf and pulled down a textbook, Federal Tax Procedures and Penalties. I flipped to the section on failure to maintain adequate records. Penalty, up to $10,000 per missing record. Potential criminal liability for officers of the company. Officers. That meant the director. That meant Julian. I closed the book. He had wanted to trim the fat. He had wanted to cut costs. By my rough mental calculation, the fines piling up in that conference room were currently outpacing my annual salary by a factor of 10. Every hour. I went to the kitchen and started baking bread. I needed to knead something. I needed to punch something. Dough was a safer legal alternative to Julian's face. As I pounded the flour and water, I realized something profound. I wasn't just the admin. I was the conscience of the company, and they had lobotomized themselves. By Thursday, the rot had reached the ceiling. The board of directors had been notified. In a normal company, the board is like the weather, distant, impersonal, and occasionally destructive. But when the IRS threatens to freeze assets, the board becomes a hurricane. My phone blew up with messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Sales VP, the head of HR, even the janitor, oddly enough, they were all phishing. Hey Chloe, long time, hope you're good. Say, do you remember where we kept the contracts for the 2020 merger? Chloe, missing your bright face. Quick question, is there a backup of the email server from last June? I didn't answer any of them. I was a ghost. A phantom limb that they were all suddenly itching to scratch. Sarah called me that evening. She sounded exhausted. Shredding things, she whispered. I saw Julian's assistant carrying a box to the shredder, but the auditors saw her. They confiscated the box. Chloe, it's like a crime scene movie in here. Did they blame me? I asked. It was the question that had been gnawing at me. Julian tried, Sarah said. I was in the break room when the chairman of the board cornered him. Julian tried to say you sabotaged the system. He said you planted a logic bomb. My stomach tightened. And the chairman asked him, did she delete the data or did she just leave? And Julian had to admit the data was technically there, just inaccessible. Then the chairman asked, why was one person the only key to our entire financial existence? And why did you fire her 3 days before an audit? I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Julian didn't have an answer, Sarah continued. He just stuttered about cost savings. The chairman literally laughed in his face, said, you saved us $80,000 in salary and cost us $5 million in fines. It's over for him, Chloe. They're just waiting for the audit to finish before they walk him out. The death spiral. It's a term we used in systems administration. It's when a process fails, and the attempt to restart the process consumes so many resources that it causes other processes to fail, creating a cascading loop of destruction. Julian was in the spiral. He had fired me to save money, the audit failed, the fines accumulated, the board panicked, the stock price, if we were public, would be tanking, his reputation was incinerated. And the best part? I hadn't done anything illegal. I hadn't planted a virus. I hadn't stolen data. I had simply taken my skills and went home. I walked to my computer and opened up a folder I had kept. It wasn't company data. It was my victory log, collection of every glowing performance review I had received for 10 years. Every year a rock star, Chloe email. If they tried to sue me, if they tried to say I was incompetent or negligent, I had a decade of proof that I was the only thing holding their house of cards together. I poured a glass of water. I felt dehydrated. The schadenfreude was salty. They're saying it's fraud, Sarah added, her voice dropping lower. On him, not you. Found emails where he told the old controller to hide the losses. The system kept the logs of those emails. The IRS has them. My system. My beautiful, paranoid hoarding system. It never deleted anything unless I told it to. It had kept Julian's secrets, and now it was vomiting them up for the feds. Karma isn't a bitch, I told Sarah. Karma is a system administrator with root access and a long memory. Friday evening, exactly 1 week since I was fired. The doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I looked through the peephole. It was Julian. He looked like he had aged 10 years in 7 days. His suit was wrinkled. His tie was loose. He hadn't shaved. The slick, arrogant MBA shark was gone. In his place was a desperate, drowning man. I opened the door. Hello, Julian, I said. He looked at me, then passed me into the house. Can I come in? No, I said. I stood in the doorway, blocking his path. What do you want? The password, he said. His voice was raspy. Please. The audit is technically over, but we have until Monday to provide the decrypted logs to mitigate the penalties. If we can show them the original data, we might survive. I might survive. He looked at me with wet, red-rimmed eyes. I'll lose everything, Chloe, my bonus, my reputation. They're talking about gross negligence lawsuits. I leaned against the doorframe. I crossed my arms. Called me a waste, I said softly. I was wrong, he pleaded. I was an idiot. I didn't know. I didn't understand the complexity. I'm sorry. Is that what you want? An apology? I am begging you. It was pathetic, truly. A grown man, a director, begging a woman in sweatpants for a magic word to save his life. It wasn't about the password, Julian, I said. It was about respect. You didn't fire me because I was redundant. Fired me because I was expensive and I wasn't cool. You wanted to replace the mechanic with a shiny new app. I took a step forward, forcing him to take a step back off my welcome mat. You can't automate respect, I said, and you can't patch integrity. Just give it to me. He snapped, a flash of his old anger breaking through. I am ordering you, I laughed. It was a genuine belly laugh. You have no power here, Julian. This isn't the conference room. This is my porch. On my porch, you're just a trespasser. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a piece of paper, a small sticky note. His eyes lit up. He thought this was it. He thought I was breaking. Here, I said, handing it to him. He grabbed it with shaking hands. He read it. It wasn't a password. It was the business card of a recruiter I knew, a recruiter who specialized in entry-level data entry jobs. They're hiring, I said. It's drag and drop, very intuitive. You'd be great at it. Stared at the card. Then he stared at me. His face went purple. You bitch, he whispered. Get off my property, I said, my voice dropping to that cold, flat tone I used when a server refused to boot. Before I call the police and tell them a disgruntled former employer is harassing me. He crumpled the card in his fist. He opened his mouth to say something else, but closed it. He looked at the house, my paid-off, peaceful house, one last time. He turned and walked to his car. I watched him go. I watched his taillights fade down the road. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel sad. I felt balanced. The ledger was closed. The account was settled. I went back inside and locked the door. I double-checked the deadbolt. 3 weeks later, the news hit the trade journals. Midwest manufacturing giant hit with record IRS fines following botched systems migration. The article was brutal, detailed the systemic failure of internal controls and the inability to produce verifiable records. It mentioned that the director of finance, Julian Vance, had resigned for personal reasons effectively immediately. I read the article on my new laptop, sitting in my new office. Well, office is a strong word. It was a coffee shop. But I was getting paid $150 an hour as an independent consultant to fix the messes made by people like Julian. My phone rang. It was the CEO of a logistics company in Chicago. Chloe, he asked, I got your number from Sarah. She said you're the wizard of spaghetti code. I prefer systems archaeologist, I said, smiling. Right. Look, we fired our admin 6 months ago and now our database is speaking Aramaic. Can you help? I can, I said, but my rate has gone up. And I require a clause in the contract. Name it. Nobody touches the back end but me. And if you fire me. I paused, looking at the sticky note I had pasted to the corner of my monitor. You have to solve a riddle to get the password. He laughed. Deal. When can you start? Monday, I said. I hung up. I took a sip of my latte. I heard later that the company, my old company, had to scrap the entire finance system and start from scratch. It cost them millions. They had to manually re-enter 5 years of data from paper receipts. They had to hire an army of temps. Julian is apparently selling solar panels now, door to door. I hope he wears comfortable shoes. I looked at the sticky note on my monitor one last time. Good luck with the audit. I peeled it off, crumbled it into a ball, and tossed it into the trash can. I didn't need luck. I had skills. And in a world of Julians, competence is the only superpower that matters.
Life doesn't always hand out clean endings, but sometimes it gives you exactly what you need. Thanks for listening. Until next time.